"You're useless, Mom. Everyone knows it." Those were the words my daughter spit at me right in the middle of my own living room, while half the neighborhood sat with forks frozen halfway to their mouths. My name is Helen Parker. I'm 72 years old, and I swear to you I felt that sentence burn hotter than any fire I'd ever cooked on. The smell of roasted chicken hung in the air, the TV hummed faintly in the background, and yet the only sound I truly heard was that one word, useless. "Melissa." My daughter smirked as if she'd won some prize. She slammed her wine glass down, cracking the rim, and leaned across the table. "You can't handle the bills, you can't handle cooking, you can't even handle yourself. Admit it." My granddaughter covered her face with her hands. My neighbor, Mrs. Evans, tried to distract the table. "Pass the bread, please," but her voice was barely a whisper. Everyone was watching me, waiting for me to crumble. And maybe they thought I would. After all, I looked like the fragile old widow, the woman with gray hair tied too tight, a cardigan too worn, hands too shaky. Melissa wanted to prove that I was finished, that she was in charge now. But here's what no one knew: upstairs in the drawer of my nightstand was an envelope. Yellowed, sealed, waiting. Inside was a letter from my late husband Henry, written long before Melissa ever dreamed of calling me worthless. And that letter held more power than Melissa could ever imagine. I felt my fingers grip the armrest of my recliner harder and harder until my knuckles ached. My voice shook, but cut the silence. "Is that truly how you see me?" Melissa laughed, tossing her hair back. "It's how everyone sees you. Weak, outdated, useless." The words stabbed again, but this time I didn't flinch. Because deep down, beneath the humiliation, something else stirred a storm waiting. The truth: I had already made a phone call that morning. To Arthur Bennett, Henry's old lawyer. He told me, "Mrs. Parker, when you're ready, I'll bring the file. But once I open it, there's no going back." And tomorrow, I was ready. I sat there smiling faintly while Melissa kept talking as though her crown had already been placed on her head. But her throne was built on sand. And Arthur's file. It was the wave about to wash it all away. That night, I stared at the envelope again. Henry's handwriting faded but clear, for Helen when the time is right. My hands trembled not from weakness, but from the weight of what I knew was coming. Melissa thought she'd broken me. She thought she had stripped me of dignity. But she had no idea the ground beneath her feet was about to crack open. And here's the cliffhanger I'll leave with you when Arthur walked into my house the next day and placed that thick folder on the table. Why did Melissa go pale as though she'd seen her entire world collapse? People think getting old means your story is over, that you're just some faded picture in a dusty frame. But my name is Helen Parker, and my story didn't end when my husband died. In fact, that's when the real battles began. For 40 years, I worked at the town library. 40 years of stamping books, sorting shelves, teaching children their first letters while my own daughter, Melissa, sat cross-legged on the carpet coloring outside the lines. I never made much money, but every dollar I earned went toward her. New shoes for school braces, for her teeth, even piano lessons she swore she hated. I skipped new coats, cut corners on groceries, worked late nights just so she could have a life brighter than mine. When my husband Henry passed heart attack in his sleep just like that, the world tilted. I remember the smell of his coffee still lingering in the kitchen that morning, the newspaper folded neatly on the table. He was gone, and suddenly it was just me and Melissa. She was 25 then, ambitious already, talking about law school, about the life she deserved. I was proud, even if she barely looked back at me. Now she's 46, sharp suits, high heels, and a tongue even sharper. She tells her friends she supports her elderly mother as if I'm some charity project. They don't know the truth. They don't know how much I gave, how much I bled for her to stand where she stands. I live in the same little house Henry and I bought in the 70s. The wallpaper is peeling. The pipes rattle in winter, but it's mine. My garden out back is small, but I still kneel there every morning, trimming roses, talking to Henry like he's still listening. Melissa says it's pathetic. "You should sell this place, Mom," she tells me. "Move into a retirement home. Let professionals take care of you before you burn the house down trying to cook dinner." I laugh it off, but the words cut deep. She doesn't see the nights I lie awake counting the bills, whispering Henry's name into the dark. She doesn't see the little victories, the meals I still cook, the books. I still read the neighbors who still come by for coffee because they know I listen better than anyone else. But Melissa only sees weakness. Last Christmas, she came over in her red coat, dropped her designer bag on the sofa, and wrinkled her nose at the smell of turkey roasting. "Dry again, Mom. You never get it right." I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled. Because that's what mothers do. We swallow the pain, hoping love will be enough. It never is. And yet inside me, something has started to shift. Every insult, every roll of her eyes, every time she calls me old or slow, it adds another brick to the fire building in my chest. I may be 72, but I am not finished. I think of Henry's last words to me in that hospital room when the beeping machines were the only sound. Don't let her forget who you are, Helen. One day, she'll need reminding. That day is closer than Melissa thinks, because while she parades around with her high-heeled confidence convinced she holds the cards, I know what waits in Arthur Bennett's office. And when those papers see daylight, it won't be me who looks useless. It'll be her. If there's one thing humiliation teaches you, it's how to stay quiet in a room full of noise. I had learned that lesson the hard way. Melissa had a way of making me feel small even in the house where she grew up. I would be standing in the kitchen apron tied too tight, hands covered in flour, trying to bake cookies like I used to when she was a child. She'd sweep in heels, clicking on the linoleum and wrinkle her nose. Seriously, Mom's store-bought would have been easier. No one wants to eat your burned rocks. The cookies weren't burned. They were fine. But in that moment, with her voice dripping sarcasm, I believed her. I scraped them into the trash just to avoid hearing her laugh. One Saturday, I struggled to set up a new phone. The box lay open on the coffee table, the instruction manual shaking in my hands. My fingers weren't as quick as they used to be, and the tiny buttons blurred under my glasses. Melissa leaned over the sofa, her perfume sharp, her tone sharper. "Oh, for God's sake, how can you not understand this? Even kids know how to use a smartphone. You're hopeless." Hopeless. Another word carved into me. I remember staring at the glowing screen, wanting to smash it against the wall. Not because of the phone, but because of her. It wasn't just at home. At the doctor's office, Melissa talked over me as if I weren't there. She forgets things she told the nurse while I sat on the edge of the exam table clutching my handbag. She can't manage her pills. I'll have to handle her insurance papers. I wanted to shout, "I can hear you, I'm not invisible." But my throat tightened, and the words never came. Sometimes late at night, I'd sit in Henry's old armchair running my fingers over the worn fabric and wonder, is this really all I am now, a burden? And yet, even in those moments of despair, small memories fought their way back. I remembered the winters I walked 2 miles in the snow to open the library, the nights I patched Melissa's torn dresses with bleeding fingers, the mornings I left extra coins on her dresser so she could buy lunch. Was that useless? No. But Melissa's words had a way of twisting reality until I doubted myself. Last month she came over with her husband Richard. They brought takeout and set it on my counter without asking. Melissa glanced around, shaking her head at the chipped plates, the cluttered shelves. "This house is falling apart," she said. "Sign it over to us, Mom. We'll take care of things." "You can't keep living like this." Richard chimed in, his voice smoother but no less cutting. "She's right, Helen. It's safer if we handle your finances now. You don't want to make mistakes." Mistakes? As if my whole life had been one. I smiled, poured them coffee, and nodded as though I agreed. But inside my stomach churned. Because I had seen this game before, the dismissive words, the slow erasing of my independence, the push to sign papers I didn't fully read. Melissa thought she was clever, thought her plan was hidden. But she didn't know that Henry had seen this possibility long ago. He had left me instructions. And Arthur Bennett, quiet, steady, Arthur was waiting for my call. That night after they left, I went upstairs, opened the drawer, and pulled out the envelope again. The seal was still unbroken. My hands shook, but not from fear this time. For the first time in years, I felt something new rise in me. Not shame, not helplessness. Resolve. The worst wounds aren't the ones delivered in private. They're the ones carved into you in front of an audience. It was supposed to be a small family dinner, just roast chicken, a simple salad and pie cooling on the counter. I'd cleaned the house top to bottom, scrubbed the old wood floors, polished Henry's picture frame. On the mantel set out my best china, even though half the cups were chipped. I wanted it to feel like family, like love. The living room glowed with the soft yellow light of the lamp Henry bought years ago at a garage sale. The table was crowded. Melissa, her husband, Richard, their daughter, my neighbor Mrs. Evans, even the pastor from down the street who had stopped by. For a moment, laughter filled the air, and I let myself believe everything was fine. Then it happened. Melissa reached for the serving spoon, sniffed at the chicken, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Dry again. Why do we even bother coming here? Mom can't cook anymore. She can't do anything anymore." The room fell silent. My hand, still holding the pie knife, trembled. I forced a smile, but my face burned hot as fire. Mrs. Evans glanced at me with pity. The pastor shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Even Richard, usually her biggest cheerleader, looked uneasy. But Melissa wasn't finished. "She forgets things, loses bills, nearly burned down the kitchen last month. She's useless, Richard. Admit it. Everyone sees it." Her voice echoed in my head. Useless, useless, useless. My granddaughter stared at me wide-eyed, confused, as if waiting for me to prove Melissa wrong. And in that moment, I couldn't. I wanted to disappear, to crawl under the table and hide. But instead, I laughed softly, the sound thin and brittle. "It's just a little overcooked, dear. Happens to everyone." Melissa rolled her eyes. "You always make excuses." The knife slipped in my hand. I stared down at the pie wussy crumbs clinging to the blade and remembered a different night years ago. Melissa, at 12 years old, her braces shining as she grinned at me from across the same table. Back then, she told me I was the best mom in the world. She begged me for another slice of pie. How quickly love turns into contempt. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears that threatened to fall in front of everyone. My voice caught, but I managed to whisper, "I did my best." Melissa snorted. "Your best isn't enough anymore." The humiliation wrapped itself around me like chains, each link forged from every sacrifice I'd made, every late night at the library, every dollar I saved for her college, every coat I went without so she could have one. And now in front of my family, my friends, my God, my daughter, declared me worthless. I excused myself, retreating to the kitchen. My legs wobbled as I leaned against the counter, staring at the pie, the roast, the feast I had prepared with love. My reflection wavered in the dark oven door, an old woman with wet eyes and trembling hands. But deep inside, beneath the shame, a spark flared. Henry's voice whispered in my memory, "Don't let her forget who you are, Helen." I pressed my hand against the drawer where the envelope lay hidden upstairs. Melissa thought she had broken me in front of everyone, but she had no idea what I still held. And as the chatter resumed in the other room, I wiped my eyes, lifted my chin, and made myself a promise this would be the last time she ever called me useless without consequence. The night after Melissa humiliated me in front of everyone, I couldn't sleep. The words replayed in my mind like a broken record. Useless, useless, useless. Each time I saw her face twisted with disdain, saw the pity in Mrs. Evans's eyes, saw the silence of my granddaughter. I sat in Henry's old armchair, the fabric frayed beneath my fingers, staring at the shadows on the living room wall. The clock ticked each second louder than the last, as if mocking me for wasting another night in silence. And then I remembered. The envelope. It had been there for years, hidden in the top drawer of my nightstand, tucked between old scarves and a rosary Henry's mother gave me. He'd given it to me shortly before his first heart scare, pressing it into my hands one evening when the sun was dipping behind the garden. "If anything happens to me," he whispered, his eyes steady, "you'll know when to open this." At the time, I laughed it off. Henry don't talk like that. But he didn't laugh. And when he died a year later, I couldn't bring myself to break the seal. It felt like opening it would mean admitting he was gone forever. Now, with Melissa's words still burning in my ears, I knew the time had come. I crept upstairs, each step creaking under my weight, and pulled open the drawer. There it was, The brown envelope edges curled, Henry's handwriting fading but still strong, for Helen when the time is right. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded neatly, and a business card, Arthur Bennett, attorney at law. The letter smelled faintly of tobacco and ink, just like Henry. My eyes blurred with tears as I read his words. Helen, if you are reading this, it means the time has come. You've always been stronger than you think, but there are people, even our own blood, who will try to take everything from you. I have placed certain protections in place. Arthur Bennett knows everything. Trust him. Do not let Melissa bully you. When you stand up, she will crumble. I pressed the paper to my chest, sobbing silently in the dark. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Henry had seen this coming. He had prepared for it. The next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card. My heart pounded with every ring. Arthur Bennett, a calm voice answered. This is Helen Parker, I stammered. Henry's wife. There was a pause, and then his voice softened. Mrs. Parker, I've been expecting your call. He remembered me. After all these years, I don't know what to do, I whispered. Melissa? She wants me to sign everything over. She treats me like I'm nothing. Arthur's tone grew firm. You are not nothing. Henry made sure of that. I still have the file he entrusted to me. But once I open it, Mrs. Parker, everything changes. Are you ready for that? I thought of Melissa's smirk, the laughter in her eyes as she called me useless in front of the pastor, the way she told her friends she supported me like I was a burden. My chest tightened, but beneath it something stronger pulsed. Yes, I said, surprising even myself. I'm ready, good Arthur replied. Come by my office tomorrow morning. Bring your courage. You'll need it. When I hung up, I sat at the table staring at the phone, my coffee growing cold beside me. Courage. Did I even have any left? But then my eyes fell on the envelope again. Henry's words etched into my heart. Trust Arthur. Do not let Melissa bully you. For the first time since Henry died, I felt something stir in my chest. Not shame, not fear, hope. That evening, Melissa called. Her voice was sugar-coated, but I could hear the steel underneath. Mom, I hope you're thinking about what I said. Richard and I can't keep coming over if you don't let us handle things. It's too much responsibility. You're making it hard on everyone. I held the phone to my ear, staring at Henry's letter on the table. For once, I didn't shrink. Don't worry, dear, I said softly. Tomorrow, everything will be taken care of. She chuckled clearly, imagining me ready to surrender. Good. You're finally making sense. If only she knew. I hung up, placed the letter back in its envelope, and looked out the window at the garden Henry and I had planted together. The roses were blooming even in the chill of spring. Melissa thought she had cornered me, but Henry's plan and Arthur Bennett's file would turn the tables. And tomorrow, when I walked into that lawyer's office, I would no longer be the woman Melissa called useless. I would be the storm she never saw coming. The next morning, I stood outside a brick building downtown staring at the faded gold letters painted on the glass, Arthur Bennett, attorney at law. My palms were slick with sweat inside my gloves, and the city air smelled of exhaust and fresh bagels from the shop on the corner. I almost turned back. Almost. But Henry's words echoed in my mind. Trust Arthur. Do not let Melissa bully you. I pushed open the heavy door. A bell jingled softly, and the receptionist looked up with a smile that felt practiced, but kind. Mrs. Parker, he's been expecting you. Expecting me. The words sent a shiver down my spine. Arthur Bennett's office was lined with shelves of law books, their spines worn from years of use. A green banker's lamp glowed on his desk, casting warm light across neat stacks of papers. He rose as I entered. Taller than I remembered, his hair silver now, but his eyes sharp behind his glasses. Mrs. Parker, he said, extending a steady hand. It's been a long time. I shook it, my fingers trembling. Henry, he told me to trust you. Arthur nodded slowly and gestured for me to sit, and he was right. He wanted to protect you even from your own daughter if it came to that. The words hit like a blow, but also a strange relief. I wasn't imagining Melissa's schemes. Henry had seen them coming. Arthur opened a file drawer, pulled out a thick folder tied with a faded blue ribbon, and laid it on the desk between us. Dust clung to the edges as though it had been waiting years for this moment. This, he said, his voice grave, is Henry's legacy. He knew Melissa's ambition. He feared it would turn cruel. Everything you need to protect yourself is in here. My breath caught as he untied the ribbon and opened the folder. The first document was Henry's will. Not the simple copy Melissa had waved in my face months ago, the one she claimed left everything to her and Richard. No, this one was detailed, carefully written, notarized with official stamps. It said I was the sole executor of Henry's estate. The house, the savings, even the small stake Henry had in a construction company outside town, all of it was under my control until the day I chose otherwise. Tears welled in my eyes. She told me there was nothing left, that I needed her to survive. Arthur's gaze hardened. Melissa lied. She's been preparing to take everything by manipulation, but Henry gave you the power to stop her. And there's more. He turned the page. Inside was a letter Henry had written to Melissa, sealed but never delivered. Arthur slid it toward me. I haven't read this. It was meant for her, but Henry instructed me to let you decide when or if she should see it. I traced the envelope with trembling fingers, recognizing Henry's handwriting instantly. The temptation to rip it open burned in me, but I stopped. Not yet, not here. Arthur cleared his throat. Henry also left instructions for an account overseas, small but secure, enough that if Melissa ever tried to cut you off, you would never be destitute. He wanted you safe. I pressed a hand to my mouth. For years, I had believed I was a burden dependent on my daughter's so-called generosity, but Henry had been watching over me all along. Arthur leaned forward. Mrs. Parker, you have more strength than you realize. Melissa may think she's in control, but you hold the real cards. The question is, are you ready to play them? My heart raced. I thought of Melissa's mocking smile, her voice dripping venom, calling me useless, while our pastor and neighbors sat in silence. My humiliation burned hot again, but this time it wasn't weakness. It was fuel. Yes, I whispered. Then louder. Yes, I'm ready. Arthur nodded, sliding the folder back toward me. Then tomorrow, when she comes to demand your signature again, you'll be ready too. Don't tell her anything yet. Let her think you've surrendered. When the time is right, I'll come to your house and bring these documents. We'll make sure she hears the truth in front of everyone. The thought sent a jolt through me. Melissa's face crumbling, her lies unraveling, her power slipping from her grasp. For the first time in years, I walked out of an office with my back straight, the folder clutched tight against my chest like armor. The city streets looked brighter. The air cleaner, even the sound of traffic, couldn't shake the spark inside me. Melissa had called me useless. Tomorrow, she would learn just how wrong she was. The following evening, Melissa called and announced, not asked, that she and Richard were coming over. We need to sort things out, Mom, she said briskly, as though she were scheduling a business meeting instead of intruding on my home. By 6 o'clock, my living room was crowded again. Melissa swept in first, her heels clicking against the wooden floor, Richard right behind her carrying a black leather briefcase. My granddaughter trailed reluctantly, headphones dangling from her ears, eyes glued to her phone. Melissa didn't bother with pleasantries. She brushed past the pictures of Henry on the wall, past the flowers I'd arranged on the table. She set a neat stack of documents down in front of me with a flourish. Here, she said, sliding them across the table, "This is the power of attorney. It's standard, Mom. You sign, we take care of the house, the bills, everything. No more stress for you. You just relax. Relax." The word felt like poison. Richard leaned forward, his voice calm, almost rehearsed. "Helen, we've been talking with some financial advisors. It's safer if we manage things now. We don't want you making mistakes. These are legal protections for you and for us." I glanced down at the stack of papers. The bold legal lettering blurred before my eyes, but I didn't need to read them to know the truth. They weren't protections. They were shackles. Melissa folded her arms, tapping her manicured nails against her elbow. "Come on, Mom. Be reasonable. You can't handle this stuff anymore. Everyone knows it. You've already admitted you forget things. You burn dinner, you." Her voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. "You're useless." I lowered my gaze, letting the silence stretch. Let her think she was winning. My fingers traced the rim of my teacup, steadying myself. Inside Henry's letter echoed in my head. Trust Arthur. Do not let Melissa bully you. I don't know, I murmured, my voice weak on purpose. It's a lot to take in. Melissa sighed dramatically. There's nothing to think about. Just sign, Mom. We'll handle everything. You'll finally be safe. Safe. The irony almost made me laugh. I picked up the pen Richard had laid carefully beside the papers. My hand shook, not from fear, but from the effort it took to hide the smile tugging at my lips. They thought they had me cornered. They thought tonight was their victory. But Arthur Bennett was coming tomorrow. Melissa leaned closer, her perfume sharp, her eyes gleaming. Do you want to end up in a nursing home, Mom alone, forgotten? This way we can take care of you. Isn't that what you want? Her words were sugar, but her tone was a blade. She didn't want to take care of me. She wanted control. I set the pen down, my hand still hovering. Maybe tomorrow, I whispered. I just need one more night to think. Richard's jaw tightened, but Melissa forced a smile. Of course, Mom. One more night. But don't drag this out. We can't keep wasting time. As they gathered their things, Melissa paused by Henry's photograph on the mantel. She tilted her head, smirking. Dad would have wanted you to be practical. The words stung, but I swallowed my anger. She didn't know Henry had already spoken. His letter was more powerful than any smirk. After they left, the house fell quiet again. I sat alone at the table, the documents still spread before me. The lamp flickered shadows dancing across the pages like ghosts. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if Melissa was right? What if I was too old, too tired? What if I was useless? But then I pictured her face when Arthur walked in tomorrow, the thick folder in his hands. I imagined her confidence shattering her lies, unraveling the silence of the room when the truth was spoken. I gathered the documents into a neat pile, set them aside, and whispered into the empty room, Not tonight, Melissa. Not ever. The clock struck 9. Tomorrow the storm would break. The next evening, Melissa and Richard returned earlier than usual. They didn't come for dinner this time. They came with a purpose. Melissa's heels clicked across my porch like a countdown to judgment. Richard carried his leather briefcase again, snapping it open before he even sat down. Let's not drag this out, Melissa said, brushing her coat off as though she were entering a courtroom, not her mother's living room. Mom, we've given you plenty of time to think. Tonight you're signing. Her words rang with authority, final like a verdict. I sat in Henry's old armchair, the papers Melissa had left yesterday still resting on the coffee table. The lamp glowed dimly above us, casting long shadows on the walls. My hands folded in my lap, still and calm. Richard laid out the documents again, tapping the lines that required my signature. It's simple, Helen. Just sign here, here, and here. After that, we'll handle the rest. Melissa crossed her arms. We've already wasted enough time. I opened my mouth, ready to stall again, but before I could speak, there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps that cut through the tension like thunder. Melissa frowned. Are you expecting someone? I shook my head. No. I rose slowly, every eye in the room following me, and opened the door. There he was, Arthur Bennett in his dark gray suit, a leather folder tucked under his arm. His silver hair gleamed in the porch light, his eyes steady and calm. Good evening, Mrs. Parker, he said, his voice rich and unwavering. May I come in? Melissa's jaw tightened. Who's this? Arthur stepped past me into the living room, offering a polite nod to the others. Arthur Bennett, attorney at law, Henry Parker's attorney to be precise. For the first time all evening, Melissa's confidence faltered. Richard stood quickly defensive. We already have an attorney handling things. Arthur smiled faintly. I'm sure you do, but this is a matter concerning Mrs. Parker, not you. He set the folder on the table directly beside their stack of papers. His folder looked heavier, thicker, like it carried the weight of truth. Melissa's eyes narrowed. Mom, what is this? Why is he here? I met her gaze evenly, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my voice. Because your father wanted it this way. Arthur cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Henry entrusted me with documents to be revealed at the right time. Mrs. Parker has decided that time is now. Melissa's face drained of color. That's ridiculous. Dad left everything to me. He told me Arthur lifted a hand. If you'll allow me, I'll read directly from the official will. This is notarized and filed, unlike the copy you seem to have in your possession. Richard's hand twitched on the briefcase, his knuckles white. The room was silent but for the ticking of the clock on the wall. My granddaughter pulled out her earbuds wide-eyed, sensing something monumental. Arthur untied the ribbon on the thick folder and opened it with deliberate care. This will name Mrs. Helen Parker as the sole executor and beneficiary of Henry Parker's estate. That includes the house savings and shares in Parker Construction. Nothing, he paused, looking squarely at Melissa, was left to Melissa Parker or Richard Carter. The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Melissa gasped, shaking her head violently. No, that's not possible. He promised me, he said. Arthur's gaze was unflinching. Henry anticipated your ambition, Ms. Parker. He feared it would override your respect for your mother. That is why he left these protections in place. Melissa's mouth opened-closed, then opened again, but no words came. Richard finally spoke, his voice low and cold. We'll contest this. Arthur raised an eyebrow. You're welcome to try, but you'll find the law is not in your favor. Henry made his intentions very clear. I sat quietly watching Melissa's face twist from disbelief to rage, to something close to fear. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel useless. Arthur closed the folder gently. Mrs. Parker, these documents give you full authority. You owe your daughter nothing, not even an explanation, unless you choose to give one. The silence stretched heavy and suffocating. Melissa's hands trembled as she gathered the useless stack of papers she had brought. Richard snapped his briefcase shut with a sharp click. I leaned forward slightly, my voice soft but firm. I may be old, Melissa. I may move slower than I used to. But don't you ever mistake that for weakness again. Melissa's eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years. Not just anger, but fear. And in that moment, I knew Henry had been right. Arthur Bennett adjusted his glasses and flipped to the second page of the will. His voice was calm but carried the weight of finality, each word slicing through the air sharper than a knife. Clause 4, he read, states that all decisions regarding the estate, this property, financial accounts, and business holdings shall remain solely in the hands of Mrs. Helen Parker until such a time as she chooses otherwise. Should she become unable to manage these affairs, the estate will pass into a trust, not to Melissa Parker or Richard Carter, but to the Parker Family Foundation, a charity Henry Parker instructed me to establish. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Melissa shot up from her chair, her face blotched red. That's insane. He never said anything about a foundation. That money was supposed to come to me. Arthur didn't flinch. Your father anticipated this reaction. That's why he wrote it so plainly. If you or anyone else tried to coerce your mother into signing away her rights, the documents here prove your efforts are void. Richard placed a hand on Melissa's arm, urging her to sit, but she shook him off violently. No, you don't understand. I took care of him at the end. He told me I'd be the one in charge. He promised me. Arthur's eyes hardened. Promises spoken in desperation don't override legal documentation. Your father made sure his last binding word was in writing. I sat silently, my heart pounding, as I watched Melissa unravel. She was always so sure of herself, always towering over me with her confidence. Now in front of her husband, her daughter, and our neighbors who had gathered out of curiosity, she looked small. Arthur turned another page. There was also a personal letter. Mrs. Parker Henry left this sealed for Melissa, but he instructed that it only be read aloud if circumstances required clarity. My breath caught. My fingers itched to stop him. Part of me still wanted to protect her, to shield her from the blow. But then I remembered her words. You're useless, Mom. Read it, I whispered. Arthur broke the seal and unfolded the letter. His voice shifted softer now as he spoke Henry's words. Melissa, if you are hearing this, it means you have forgotten the most important lesson I ever tried to teach you. Respect your mother. She is the reason you stand where you are today. If you have treated her with cruelty, if you have tried to strip her of what she has built with me, then know this: everything you sought to take is no longer yours to claim. You inherit nothing until you can prove you have honored her." The room went deathly still. Melissa's knees buckled and she sank back into her chair. Her eyes darted from me to Arthur to the letter as though searching for a way out. He didn't mean this. He couldn't have meant this. Arthur folded the letter neatly. He meant every word. Even Richard looked rattled. He ran a hand through his hair, muttering under his breath. My granddaughter, still clutching her phone, whispered softly, "Mom," but Melissa didn't answer. I finally spoke, my voice low but steady. "I never wanted it to come to this, Melissa. All I wanted was respect. All I wanted was for you to see me not as a burden, but as your mother." Melissa's eyes filled with tears, though I couldn't tell if they were from shame or fury. "This isn't fair." After everything I've done, Arthur closed the folder with a firm snap. "Fairness is irrelevant. This is the law, and the truth." I leaned forward, meeting my daughter's gaze. For once, she couldn't look away. "You wanted to show everyone that I was useless, but tonight everyone sees the truth. The only one powerless here is you." Melissa's lips trembled. She shoved back her chair, storming toward the door, Richard following close behind. "This isn't over," she shouted, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. The silence afterward was deafening. Arthur placed the folder gently into my hands. "It's yours now, Mrs. Parker. Everything. No one can take it from you." For the first time in years, I felt the weight on my shoulders lift. Henry had given me armor, and Arthur had delivered it at the perfect moment. I looked around the room at my granddaughter's wide, uncertain eyes, at Mrs. Evans clutching her pearls in shock, at the pastor whispering a quiet prayer, and I realized something: Melissa wasn't the only one who had underestimated me. They all had. Not anymore. The air in the living room was heavy, thick enough to choke on. The slam of the front door still echoed as Melissa and Richard stormed out, but Arthur remained seated, his folder open before him. He didn't move right away. Instead, he tapped a finger against one final envelope tucked inside. "Mrs. Parker," he said carefully, his eyes meeting mine. "There's one more document Henry left. I wasn't sure if tonight would be the right time to reveal it, but after what just happened, I think it is." My heart thudded in my chest. Another letter. Arthur nodded. "Yes, not for you this time, for everyone." He pulled the envelope free, breaking the seal with deliberate care. The room had grown quiet again. My granddaughter leaned forward. Mrs. Evans clutched her cup of tea. The pastor folded his hands as if in prayer. Arthur unfolded the paper. His voice softened, but the weight of Henry's words filled every corner of the room. "To my family, if this letter is being read, then the truth has already come out. I leave this not as a will, but as a warning. I loved my daughter Melissa, but I saw the pride in her eyes, the hunger for control. I feared it would turn against her mother. So I leave this for clarity. Nothing matters more than respect for the woman who gave you life. Without it, you inherit nothing." Arthur paused, glancing at me before continuing. "Helen, if they try to shame you, remember this. You are the backbone of this family. You carried more weight than anyone knew. You sacrificed, you endured, and without you, Melissa would not stand where she does. Do not let her diminish you. If she forgets, let this letter remind her and everyone else of the truth." My throat tightened and tears burned at the corners of my eyes. Hearing Henry's voice through Arthur, it felt as though he was standing in the room again, steadying me like he always had. Arthur's voice grew firmer. "Melissa, if you are hearing this, I beg you to change. The greed I sense in you will destroy everything. You will not take this house. You will not take what Helen and I built together unless you prove yourself worthy by honoring your mother. Until then, every door will be closed to you." A murmur rippled through the room. My granddaughter stared at the letter wide-eyed. Mrs. Evans whispered, "My goodness!" The pastor bowed his head. Powerful words. Arthur folded the letter slowly, laying it on the table where Melissa had sat moments before. Henry wanted there to be no doubt. He wanted this to be his final word. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. They slid down my cheeks, hot and unrelenting. He knew. All this time he knew she would turn against me. Arthur placed a gentle hand on mine. He trusted you to be strong enough to withstand it. And tonight, you proved him right. I closed my eyes, hearing Henry's steady voice in my mind. Don't let her forget who you are, Helen. When I opened them, I felt something new, something fierce. Melissa could scream, deny, even threaten to contest the will, but Henry's words were carved in stone now. She could never erase them. Arthur leaned back, his tone practical once more. I'll keep this letter in the official record, but I recommend you also keep a copy. If Melissa tries to manipulate anyone again, you show them this. It will end the argument before it begins. I nodded, still clutching the edge of the table for balance. My granddaughter slipped closer, resting her small hand on mine. Grandma, she whispered, I'm proud of you. The words shattered me all over again, but this time in the best way. For years, I'd longed for respect, for recognition. Tonight, I finally had it. Arthur stood gathering his folder. This was Henry's final safeguard. He loved you enough to think years ahead. And now his words have done what he intended. They've restored your place, your dignity. I rose to my feet slowly, my knees creaking, but my back straight. Melissa wanted everyone to see me as useless, I said softly, but now everyone will see the truth, that I was never weak, that I was never nothing. The pastor placed a hand on my shoulder. You've reminded us all that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply endures and waits for the right moment. Arthur gave me one last nod before heading for the door. Be ready, Mrs. Parker. Melissa won't give up easily, but she can't undo what Henry left behind. As the door closed behind him, I stood in the quiet house, Henry's letter still on the table, the words echoing in my mind. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt unshakable. When Arthur left that night carrying Henry's folder tucked neatly under his arm, the house seemed quieter than it had in years. Not the heavy silence of shame or humiliation, but a stillness that felt cleansing. I stood by the mantel gazing at Henry's photograph. His eyes twinkled at me from behind the glass, the same gentle eyes that had steadied me through storms. For so long I had believed his death left me unprotected, that I had to face Melissa's cruelty alone. But tonight I realized something I should have known all along. Henry had never stopped protecting me. Even in death, he had left me strength. I turned and looked around my living room, the place where Melissa had tried to humiliate me, the place she wanted to strip from me. The old armchair where Henry used to sit, the chipped china on the shelf, the faded wallpaper. To anyone else, it was just an aging house. But to me, it was proof of a life lived, sacrifices made, love poured into every corner. This home was not useless, and neither was I. Melissa's words had cut deep, yes. They'd made me question my worth, my mind, even my memories. But tonight, hearing Henry's letter read aloud, I felt a weight lift. I wasn't the one who had lost my way. She had. I sat down at the kitchen table, the wood scarred with years of meals, arguments, laughter. My granddaughter slipped into the chair beside me, her phone forgotten in her lap. She looked up at me with wide, earnest eyes. Grandma, she said softly, Mom was wrong. You're not useless. You're the strongest person I know. The tears came again, but this time they weren't bitter. They were warm, cleansing, like rain after a drought. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know. For years I had believed my silence was strength, that by swallowing Melissa's cruel words, by pretending not to notice her disdain, I was keeping peace in the family. But real strength, I finally understood, was not silence. Real strength was standing tall even when someone tried to push you down. Real strength was knowing your worth, even when your own child tried to erase it. I thought of all the women I'd known at the library, women who whispered about children who no longer called children, who only visited when they wanted money. I thought of the neighbors who nodded politely but assumed age meant weakness, and I realized this wasn't just my story. It was theirs too. We are not useless. We are not burdens. We are the ones who carried this family, this community through decades of hard work and sacrifice. Without us, none of them would be where they are. I rose from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Henry and I had planted together. The roses were blooming stubbornly, even against the chill of early spring. Their petals were ragged in places, but still beautiful, still alive. Like me. For the first time in years, I didn't dread the morning. I didn't fear Melissa's next visit, her next sneer, her next attempt to break me, because I knew the truth now. Henry had given me the legal protection, yes, but more importantly, he had given me the reminder I needed that I mattered. I whispered into the quiet house as if Henry were standing right beside me. "Thank you, my love. I'll be strong now. For you. For me." And in that moment, I felt lighter, freer. But deep down, another thought gnawed at me. Melissa wasn't finished. I had seen the fury in her eyes as she stormed out. She wouldn't give up easily. She would scheme again, push harder, perhaps even stoop lower. Still, I wasn't afraid anymore. Because now I carried the truth written in Henry's own hand. And the truth has a way of breaking lies apart no matter how tightly they're woven. As the clock chimed midnight, I pressed a hand to my chest and closed my eyes. I wasn't useless. I wasn't invisible. I was Helen Parker, and I was finally ready to live, not just survive. I thought the night had finally given me peace. After Arthur left, after the words from Henry's letter still echoed in my chest, I sat in the quiet of the house sipping a lukewarm cup of tea. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe freely, to believe that the worst was behind me. The documents were safe in Arthur's hands. My granddaughter had hugged me goodnight with a whispered, "I love you, Grandma." The house, though old and creaking, felt warm again. I leaned back in Henry's armchair, eyes half closed, ready to let sleep finally claim me. And then knock, knock, knock. The sound jolted me upright. 3 sharp raps against the front door, steady and deliberate. My heart pounded. It was nearly midnight. Who would be at my door at this hour? I rose slowly, the floorboards groaning beneath my feet. The hallway seemed darker than usual, the shadows deeper. For a moment I thought of ignoring it, pretending I hadn't heard. But the knocking came again, louder this time. I pulled the door open just a crack, the chain still fastened. On the porch stood a man I didn't recognize. He wore a dark coat, a hat pulled low over his face. In his hand was a sealed envelope, edges stamped with red wax. Mrs. Parker. His voice was deep calm, but carried a weight that made my stomach tighten. "Yes," I asked, my voice trembling. He held out the envelope. "This is for you, from Henry Parker." My breath caught. That's impossible. Henry's been gone for years. The man's expression didn't change. I was instructed to deliver it. Now. He pressed the envelope into my hand, tipped his hat, and walked into the night without another word. I stood frozen in the doorway, the envelope heavy in my palm. The wax glistened in the porch light, Henry's initials pressed into the seal. Behind me, the clock struck 12, the chimes echoing through the empty house. My fingers shook as I traced the seal. What else had Henry planned? Why hadn't Arthur mentioned this? And why, after all these years, was another letter appearing now? I closed the door, bolted the lock, and carried the envelope to the table. I set it beside the untouched pie from earlier, the contrast almost absurd, ordinary life beside extraordinary secrets. I didn't open it. Not yet. Fear and curiosity battled in my chest. As I sat in the silence staring at that sealed letter, one thought refused to leave me. If Henry had prepared one last message, what truths or dangers were still waiting to be uncovered? So here I am, sitting alone in my quiet house, a sealed envelope from Henry, resting on the table, waiting to be opened. My daughter thinks she's already lost, but she doesn't know the story isn't finished yet. Not for her, not for me. And now I want to ask you if this had been your life, if your own child humiliated you, called you useless, tried to strip away everything you built, and then in the middle of the night a stranger handed you a letter from the person you loved most. Long after they were gone, what would you do? Would you open it immediately, hungry for the truth? Or would you wait afraid of what those words might reveal? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments below, what would your choice be? Because I know I'm not the only parent or grandparent who has faced betrayal, who has struggled with family, who has felt invisible until the truth finally came out. If this story touched you, if you found yourself holding your breath as I did, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Share this video with a friend who might need a reminder that age does not mean weakness, that silence does not mean uselessness. And most of all, stay with me, because this isn't the end. That envelope on my table holds the next chapter, and when I open it, everything may change again.